Hello, everyone, and welcome to part two of the Unwrapping week. And I hope that you managed to get part one done with doing the basic shapes, because now we're going to get on something a little more complicated, and that's unwrapping a human being and learning about new tools and also using old tools that we learned, like the Relax tool and the Render. So I'm going to provide you this 3D model of a basic, what they call chibi anime 3D model, a very basic 3D model with a really low polygon count. And I want you to start beginning to unwrap this. Now, if I go to my modifier panel here, go to my modifier list, I add the Unwrap UVW modifier right here, and then you go down as per usual to our Edit UV submenu and Open UV Editor. You can see I laid out a very basic unwrap right here, but I'm actually going to mess up that entire thing. I'm just going to, let's say, make it look like this, which is not good. Now, this unwrap that we currently have is half a model. Now, if you want your model to be symmetrical with the texture detail, I always suggest you cut your model in half and just mirror it over so that there's a second model mirrored here. So you can see this is a mirror reference. Okay. To do that, if you go back to our old tutorials, if you go to Tools, Mirror, so I will delete this half. So you have half your model. Because I know that the other half is going to be completely symmetrical, I just go to Tools, Mirror, and then it creates a copy. You can see it's X, Y, or Z, and I want to create a reference. And you find the right angle, and there we go. The reason why we want to create a reference is because the reference will always mimic what we have on this model. So you can see we have Unwrap UV and Edit Poly. If I go here, we have the Unwrap UV and Edit Poly, and any unwrapping I do to this side of the model will automatically occur to the other side of the model. So as we go on and we do this one step at a time, we're going to break this model down into pieces that we're going to work on. And we can go and use the peel and see method like we did before and repeat the same process over a model like this. So by using that method, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Polygon, and I'm just going to align a projection planar map just so I can see the whole body here. Okay? I'm going to move that off the grid, and now I'm going to start cutting edges. So the first one I want to cut off is the arm. So I'm going to cut a seam that will cut the arm off, and I'm going to roughly work, let's turn off select by ignore back facing so that we can select all the edges we want at any time. And I'm going to cut off from the top ring of the arm here. So that's going to cut off the arm. My next step is to cut off the wrist. This will be the hand. And if you want, you can keep clicking quick peel while you're doing this. Like add the edges, then quick peel. So, and you can do this as you go, so it becomes a little bit easier for you to manage and to know what it's going to look like. So if I go convert edge selection to seams right now, and then go quick peel, we can see we have basic hand and we got the arm. Now, obviously it's not looking the best in the world. We need to add a couple more seams, and then it's going to automatically unwrap some more. So I'm going to add a seam down the arm. So the reason why I want to make a line down the cylinder is because remember that we have to lay this flat on a table. Picture it like pieces of cloth, and you need to cut this open so that you can lay the entire thing flat and clean on a table. So if I go convert edge selection to seams right now, and I added this one, and then I go to quick peel again, you can see that this arm has a much better peel effect to it. It's almost perfect, right? And that's what we need to keep doing for all of this as well. We're going to actually go around our fingers and do the same method. So I'm going to select my edges here, and I'm going to make these into new selections. So I'm actually going to grab all the top rings of these fingers, so roughly there, and then I'm going to wrap around underneath. And grab these fingers. Let's see if that looks okay. That looks good. And then I'm going to do the same for the thumb. Now remember that even if I cut these circular shapes, it's going to cut off the fingers, but we're not going to get space. Like, it's try and pretend that this is a piece of cloth, right? So we cut this finger off, chop, chop, and you have a tube. Now try and lay a tube flat on the table. What happens? Well, one part of the tube is always overlapping the other part of the tube. Now that's why we did this with the tube on the arm. We cut a line down it, and we need to replicate that kind of line seam down here as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut a seam across here, and we're going to have to wrap this seam to another seam line. So we can either take this and cut it like this, so we get the bottom part of the palm. And what you can do is you can actually do this. Go all the way to the top, do that. And now you see if we go to convert edge, quick seam, we get a much better finger unwrap. And I'm going to do that for all parts of my model. The reason why I grab all the way up here is because I'm creating a nice loop and a nice palm that I can use. So this, and I take away those edges here and wrap up, is to get a nice palm effect. So that when I need to texture the bottom base of the hand, we get this nice hand effect. So I'm going to turn off map seams. So I turn off all the green lines. And I'm just going to grab this here. Like that. So what I get is nice separated fingers. I'll just cut all these fingers off all the way like that. And then I'm going to quick peel that now and see what it looks like. So I get these nice finger separations. I get these nice fingers that look good and unwrapped. And you can always go to the top right of your Edit UVW window. Remember that we have Texture Checker and Checker Pattern, and we can switch between those. The reason why I have a map number 8 texture base is because I applied a texture to this mesh previously. So you can actually always switch to a texture if you applied a texture to that mesh and see what it looks like. So if I go to Checker Pattern, it's actually really telling if I go to Polygon and scale these, and scale it really, really big, I can see a nice checkerboard pattern all around the model. And if I see any stretching so far, I know that, there might be an issue with this model. If I grab these polys here, you can see that they look sort of all right, but there's a lot of texture stretching issues that are happening here, which means I'm going to have to do a seam cut here as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to follow the flow of this hand, and I'm actually going to cut a seam here and a seam line here. So what I'm doing is I'm separating the top and the bottom of the hand by creating these seams across it. See, so now if I go to polygon mode, I'll grab these polys, I'll rotate around. You can see I have a line across the hand here, a line across the hand here, and that's to separate the top part of the hand from the bottom part of the hand. And the fingers are now cut off, and the fingers have these little segments up here, which we can then stitch together afterwards. So that works out okay. And I'm going to do another quick peel. And you can see these unwraps turned out pretty well. The top and the bottom of the hand look really, really good. And that looks fine. So now we want to separate, like, let's say our pants. So my pants start up really high since this is a super deformed model. I'll start the pants up here, and I will create a seam that goes around. Don't forget that this model is mirrored to this side. So anytime we create a seam line here, it actually replicates the same seam line on the other side. So what you'll have is an identical seam. The next seam line I create will be at the pelvis. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just separating these models. I might go one lower than the pelvis. No, I'll go to the pelvis right here. And I'll go across here. So the reason why we're building seam lines like this is we're technically cutting apart this model into a bunch of different sections so that it lays completely flat against here without any problems at all. And I'll actually probably make a line across here. And you always want to hide seam lines. Like, see, I hid under the arm. I hid across the hand here. Because if the camera zooms in, those seam lines are probably going to be less visible and never available because most of the time a texture starts stretching around the seam line, And the less visible they are, the less problems you'll have. Um, so when you have a model as complex as this, really it's just taking your time and realizing, okay, I want the arm cut off here because that's a big tube. I want the body cut off here because that's another big tube. And just realizing how to lay it flat completely. Now, if you follow the example of, uh, this arm here, we cut this part and cut this part, so what you get is a tube on the table. So we cut a line down that so it actually lay completely flat like a piece of paper on the table. We need to do the same thing for the body. The body right now would actually be a big tube going up the neck. So we need to cut the neck out first, like that. I'll convert that edge to a seam. And then I'm going to cut the front and the back of the body off by adding 2 more seam lines. I'm going to continue the seam line from the arm here, bring it down the side of the body, like that. And that's where my seam line will be for here. And then going down to the legs, this should actually be fine on its own. And then I create the seam line here. And I'm actually going to continue that seam line down the side of the leg to the ankle, where I'm actually going to cut off the legs. So really when you're using the edge and seam method, you're just trying to cut shapes so that they become flat objects when you do the quick peel inside your texture map. And if a model is completely symmetrical, you only have to unwrap half of it, and then the other half will automatically be unwrapped because you unwrap this portion. So I'm going to convert those new edges to seams, and then I'm going to quick peel that. You can see we're getting a lot of different parts of the body now, but this checker pattern is looking really darn good. And we just need to keep this up because we're not finished yet. We cut the neck at the bottom. We're going to cut the neck at the top, maybe around here. And that will be so that we separate the head from the neck itself. You could technically just keep the neck here. In fact, no, you know what? Just for heaven's sakes, we're just going to convert that to a seam and make sure that our neck is completely separate in case you want to put some detail there. You can also separate the eyes out here. I have eyeballs, like as spheres that we're going to put in, so I'm not too concerned about separating that out. But this looks good so far. And then we have to concentrate on the feet now. So the bottoms of the feet, we're going to cut those out so that that can be unwrapped a lot easier. There you go, convert that to a seam. Now what you're going to get with this is actually going to be a little bit of an issue with the foot unwrapping because obviously a camera can't wrap around really clearly around the foot. But we can see what it looks like so far. And yeah, you can see the top of the foot here. I believe this is it. Yep, it's still having some issues. So I'm going to create a couple seam lines here in the back. Maybe even just one seam line in the back might help. Let's see. I'll take the back of the foot here, convert that edge to a seam, and look how much better that looks. Watch, undo. That's what my foot looked like. I added a seam line down the back of the foot. I convert edge to seam. Make sure this blue line's here. And that looks much, much better. And you know what? Technically, this model is completely unwrapped. So, and that was just using the seam and peel method. We managed to do that in less than 15 minutes. All we need to do, like I said, when it comes to doing something more complex, is figure out where the seam lines are, go to edge mode, grab those seams, convert edge to seam, and then quick peel. And normally that will be able to do it just really well for you. We have half a human character here that we managed just to put seam lines down and do that. Now, if your character had more complicated parts, like let's say there's a pouch here, you can just go around this area and cut this out too. Convert edge to seam, and that becomes a new area so that when it quick peels, you can see this pouch is a whole new area. And you can continue doing that for every single complicated part of the model, quick peel. And if you are confused about which part of a model goes where, just go to texture checker and you can see that this color grid follows on top of the parts of the model here. So if I go, okay, light blue, dark blue, and this is E4, E4, boom, there's the head. Follow down here, A2, boom. And if the letters are mirrored in a way that you don't like, then you can always go to Unwrap UV Polygon, and you can always grab the polygons. Let's say this leg, I want these letters and numbers facing the right way. Then I will go to Tools, and I'll flip horizontal. And you see, you have a good look right here, just like that. Don't forget that now that your model is completely unwrapped, and I'll just go to checker pattern mode, I'm going to go to Rescale Elements, to make sure all these elements are completely evenly sized. So our texture is very even all across this organic model here. And the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to pack these together. So there's two options. There's pack together and pack normalize. Pack normalize I find is a much better option because it adds more spacing in everything. So, and I also click on rotate. That means it'll rotate our model to fit more together inside this unwrap. And so once I click rotate and rescale, and you can turn off rescale if you don't want anything to rescale, then I'm going to go to pack normalize, keep the padding at 0.02 or 0.01 if you need more drawing space. You'll see 0.02 looks like this. See, it's much more space, and 0.01 actually fills it up actually a lot better. If I turn it to 0.00, packs everything really tight. I would suggest probably 0.01 being the best. And now we got a really nice checkerboard pattern texture all over our character. Now there are certain bits that maybe we want to clean up a bit. And like I said before, we can stitch things together. So for instance, this palm of the hand. So at this bottom of the hand, I find it in our map, and I'm just going to drag this off here. Now, let's say these little finger bits, these finger strips that are all over our texture, I don't want them just hanging around outside like this. So I grab them, and I'm going to put them in my working area. Grab this one too, and I'm going to grab this one too, and make sure everything's kind of, out here. So I see 5 fingers. I'm going to select them all, make sure. Those are my 5 fingers right there. And this should be the bottom of my palm there, which is great. So I'm going to go to vertex mode, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this finger right here, and I'm going to find out where it's aligned to. So I grab these vertexes on this finger, and I zoom in really close, and I see that these polygons here that I'm selecting, this line turns blue right here, which means that these polygons attach to this somehow. And I select these 2 vertexes down at the bottom, and I see that once I select one of these vertexes, one vertex, I see a little vertex turn blue here. If I select this vertex, the little vertex turns blue here. If I select both of them, the line turns entirely blue, which is telling me that this edge right here matches this edge right here. So I'm going to stitch them together. Now we could always go to, grab this, rotate it in place. So let's say I grab that, rotate it in place. And this, we'll call this method 1. Go to vertex mode. You can go tools, target weld, and grab these vertexes and weld them together like that. And they're completely welded. The next mode, option 2, is to grab both these vertexes, so the one from the hand and the one from the finger that turned blue, and scale them together and push Ctrl W or go to Tools, Weld Selected, and it will weld those 2 polygons together if they're really close. Ctrl W. And you can see this line turned white, which means that there is no seam line anymore, and they're completely welded. So those are the first 2 methods. The other method is actually going to what's called the stitch method. And the stitch method is actually really good because what we can do with that is I can grab these 2 vertexes, and it automatically detects that these 2 other vertexes belong with these 2. And if I go to stitch to target, what happens is the 2 vertexes I have selected automatically fly to their other counterparts. So you can see stitch to target right there. You can also go stitch to average, which will actually go 50% of the way. So these 2 vertexes over here will actually only go halfway, and the 2 vertexes I have selected will go halfway as well. And then you can go stitch to source, or you can try stitch custom. Now stitch custom rotates the actual polygons to fit together properly with what you currently have selected. So you can see my finger entirely matches like this. So if I select these vertexes here that connect to the bottom of the base here, and these vertexes here, and these vertexes here. Oh, one moment, and we'll continue our video recording in just 1 minute.